Welcome everybody to night 3 of the Spring into Reading Conference. We are going to be hearing from Cécile Lainé, first of all. She is an accomplished French teacher who has dedicated to growing alongside her students. She's the author of several language learner books, and she's the co-author of the monthly publication Le Petit Journal Francophone. And she is deeply committed to supporting, mentoring, and collaborating with world language teachers while continuing on her own language journey. So Cécile, I'm going to stop sharing so that you can go ahead and start sharing your presentation, and you can take it away.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing well, and I hope that the beginning of spring is treating you well. I am on spring break, so it's been really wonderful here in Tennessee. And this is our first class novel centering student voice and choice. I'm Cécile Lainé, and I'm here because I love reading with kids in general. And as you can see from the pictures, this is me at various stages of my life, reading to my children, reading to my students, with my students, reading in parks, giving out free books at my daughter's daycare, and then a little bit later on in life, writing my own books and publishing my own books. So bonjour. Today we're going to talk about voice and choice with reading. So the guiding questions I would like for you to keep in mind are: how much agency do your students have in choosing what they read? How and where they read? And how they are assessed. So if you think about those questions, if I look at my own practice, maybe a decade ago, I would say that my students, as far as classroom novel is concerned, had very little agency in choosing any of this. I was the one choosing the book. I was the one choosing how we read, where we read, when we read. And of course, I was the one choosing the assessments. And so this presentation is hopefully going to give you some key ideas on how to provide more choice and give a little bit more control to your students. So let's jump in. Choosing what we read, right? So I'm the teacher, I know better. I'm going to choose a book for my students, and that's great. But what if we, as teachers, chose 2 books? And we chose 2 books based on student interest. What are my students into? Linguistic knowledge. What's their level? Are we in the first semester of the first year? Are we in the second semester of the first year? What level do they have? What kind of language do they already know? Their background knowledge. So for example, my 5th graders, second semester, they do a geography unit on Latin America. So they're starting to build some background knowledge on Latin America. So that's something that I could use in the book that I choose. Text features. Those are aspects of the book that support my students' comprehension. So when you think about a language reader, these are things like the glossary, the footnotes, the illustrations, maybe questions, maybe author's notes. What are the features of the book that will support my students really grasping what the story is about? And those 4 criteria come directly from this wonderful book, Common Ground, Second Language Acquisition Theory Goes to the Classroom by Henshaw and Hawkins. I highly recommend this book. And then, of course, there is a 5th component when you choose a book, which is extremely important, and that is thoughtful representation of identities and communities. There are resources that can help us choose those books. The first resource here for you is the Word Language Bookshelf. This website is amazing, and it's got all of the language readers available in Spanish, French, and German. And then the other wonderful resource to help us select a book, especially when it comes to thoughtfully representing identities and communities, is LAB, the Language Learner Literature Advisory Board. So we're thinking about our students, and we've picked 2 books. So we're going to go ahead and just buy 1 copy of each and read them to ourselves and feel like, yep, those are the 2 books that I want to present to my students. So here are two examples. The first one is a graphic novel that I wrote, and the second one is Le Capybara Beauté by Myra Kenyon. And so I'm going to present those two books to my students. I'm going to let them choose what they want to read. So how are we going to do that? Some authors have book trailers available with their books. So my graphic novel does have a book trailer. And then for the Capybara Beauté, I asked permission to Myra Kenyon if I could create a book trailer, and she said yes. So I created two book trailers, and we're going to watch the book trailers with my students. Next, I'm going to give them a sample of the book, because the book trailer is going to be enticing and they might be like, yeah, we want to read this book. But then when they actually start reading, it's too hard. So every author always has a sample available on their author website and on the Voces digital website. You can also read samples. So I present the two samples to my students. They read it. They read each of them, and then we vote. And I make a big deal about the vote. We do a Google form, and then we do a drum rolls with their vote, and ta-da! Now we have a winner. I'm not going to tell you who the winner was. And not only we have a winner, but what we have, which is really important, is buy-in. So now we have 60% of the students that are really bought into what we're about to read. And even the 40% that voted for the other book, guess what? Their peers voted for this book. So the cool factor is really important here. It's not the teacher who decided what the book was going to be. It's their peers. So I bet you that those 40% are still excited to try the book that their peers decided on. And who knows, maybe when we're done, maybe we'll do the next book. So this is a very powerful way of infusing choice in choosing a classroom novel. If you don't feel techie and you don't want to create a little book trailer, or if the author hasn't made a book trailer available for you, no problem. You can do a book talk. And a book talk is very easy. You just grab the book and start talking about it in language that your students comprehend, going slow, using repetition, and clarifying any terms. You might even show them. And that can easily replace the book trailer. But the book trailer, I can tell you, it has a really cool factor attached to it. Now I'd like to move on to the novice reading cycle. And to be clear, this is my novice reading cycle. This is what I have felt comfortable and my students have felt comfortable with. And I didn't mention, but when I think about novice students, I think about middle school because that's where I've been living for the past 5 years. I teach 5th, 6th, and 7th grade. So when I think novice, I think middle schoolers. You might have a different picture in your head of your own novices. So again, this is my reading cycle, and you can take it, leave it, grab some ideas, make it your own, and make it work for your students. I use a very simple cycle. First, I hook my students. We'll talk about that in a second. Then we read together. Then I assess them. Sometimes I will extend. We'll not talk about this today. And then we go back into hooking and reading. This cycle emphasizes 3 things. Comprehension, that is critical. Without comprehension, no language acquisition can happen. So comprehension of the story, enjoyment of the story. I want my students to love reading, and then building community with the book. The very first classroom novel that you do with your novice, it's kind of nerve-wracking because it sets the stage for any subsequent kind of fiction reading that you're going to do, or books that you're going to read. So it's really critical that that first book be successful, that the students feel like they comprehend what's happening, that they're enjoying the book, and that we're building community. What the cycle is not focused on is front-loading a ton of vocabulary. I never pre-teach any vocabulary before starting a book. When I start a book, my students already have all of the key foundational language that they need, and any book-specific vocabulary that is going to show up will tackle naturally. I do not ask my students to memorize any vocabulary. We do very few comprehension questions. The only comprehension questions that I do are while I'm reading to make sure that they are understanding, but I don't do death by, the 20 comprehension questions that you have to answer. And we don't do a lot of extra activities. I keep it very simple and very focused on comprehension, enjoyment, and community. And what that means, my friends, is that we can read a book within 1 or 2 weeks max. And then we can read another book. So it's this idea of not dragging a classroom novel until you basically beat it to death, right? It's this idea of focusing on what's important. I want them to experience a home run with our first reading. So let's talk about hooking students first. And at the end of this presentation, I will send you a one-pager with lots of different ideas. But in this presentation, and for the sake of time, I'm only going to focus on 2-ish ideas for each of the stages. Keep it really focused for you, okay? So hooking students. Picture talks is my favorite way of hooking students to a book. So let's take an example. First of all, there are 2 kinds of picture talks. There is a descriptive picture talk. So you put an image and you're describing the image, and your students are describing the image, and you're scaffolding and you're asking them questions, and together you are describing the image. If you want to infuse choice and voice, you probably want to stay away from a descriptive type of picture talk and move to a predictive picture talk. Basically, see, think, wonder, right? So here is an example with one of my books. This is the cover, but you can do this with any illustrations from the book. I see over here, I think that, and I wonder. I ask my students to write little post-it notes with their novice language. What do you see? What do you think? And what do you wonder? It doesn't matter if there are mistakes on the post-it notes. The goal is not so much it's not accuracy at all. The goal is to start warming up their brain, and also give me some materials so that we can start talking about what they're wondering. In the I see section, obviously, you're going to get the descriptive piece. So we go through this pretty quickly. I see a person. I see karate, maybe. I see blue. I see long hair, things like that. Okay, go through that pretty quickly. I think that she is frustrated. Somebody said right here, I think that she's frustrated. Yeah. I think that she likes karate. Yeah. And the gold mine is down here when they write what they're wondering. So someone wonders, I wonder how old this person is. And so now I can start milking that. Oh, Susie asked how old, she wonders how old this person is. What do you think? Do you think this person is 15? Do you think this person is 20? Do you think this person is an adult? And so I can get now voice from my students and different responses. Someone asked, I wonder what is in the list. Oh, that's so cool that they saw that the title here was La Liste, the list, and they're wondering what's on the list. So I asked them, what do you think is on the list? Is this list with foods? Do you think it's a list of things she wants to do? And we just can have a natural novice level conversation about their wonders. So it's a wonderful way to infuse choice. Another picture talk here, if you feel like your students are too novice to be writing, here is an illustration, and you can just ask, in your opinion, where is Alice? Who is the boy with the dark hair? And how does she feel? And you can see that those are very novice questions, right? They can answer with one word. They don't have to use a complete sentence. They can answer school, cafeteria. They can answer and the name of the person, and they can answer with an emotion. Another way to hook students is to do polls. And I'm sure you are very familiar with this. But again, how do we put in some choice in everything that we do? That's the lens for today. So in the book, the main character is going to get some bad news. And so I put together a little poll. When I have bad news, you're going to go around the room and ask classmates how they react to bad news. And then we'll tally the results. So they go around, what do you do when you have bad news in the target language? And they have some possible responses. I speak with a friend. I speak with a few friends. I speak with everyone. I speak with a member of my family, and here are different family members listed. I speak with my pet. I write in my journal. I eat chocolate, and here is the choice here, another answer. This is such a emotional question, really. You know, what do you do when you have bad news? So I really want to make sure I have space for anyone who has a different kind of answer. In fact, I did this poll about 2 weeks ago, and I think someone said, I listen to music. Right, that's true. I didn't even I didn't even think about that. So again, as the teacher, I don't have all the answers. I can provide some answers in novice language, using novice language, but I always want to make sure there is a place for my students to tell me. And if they don't happen to know how to say it, that's okay. Tell me in English, and then I'm going to write it. And then at the end of the poll, we tally the results, and then I can ask questions like, how many students said, I speak with a friend, and they give me the number. This is all in the target language. How many students said they speak with a family member? How many said their mother? How many said brother, sister, cousin, etc.? And then at the end, I can also ask, so how does the majority of the class deal with bad news? So it's a really important topic. It connects them to the book, and it hooks them in a way that also provides choice. I have way more ways, a lot of more ways that I hook students, but we're going to move on. Oh, I forgot one thing. Again, if your students are not ready to interact in that way, another simple way of doing a poll is to have them stand up and present them with two options. So here we're doing a prediction. Alice is going to go to this ice cream parlor with her friends, or Alice is going to go to this ice cream parlor with Bilal. And then the students can just move their bodies on one end or the other end of the room. And it's a nice way to also take a break. And then you can start saying, ooh, the majority of people think she's going to go with Bilal. And there's only 2 of you who think that she's going to go with her friends. It's just a different way of doing the poll. All right, so again, in the one-pager at the end of this presentation, you'll have more ideas to hook your students, but for now, we are moving on to reading. Okay, so my favorite way to read with my students, with my novice students, that is to do a teacher read aloud, right? So basically, you are reading the book to your students, and your students may follow along with you. But it's really important that they hear the language and they're seeing the language and it's hitting their brains both ways. Sometimes I let students follow along with a partner. Sometimes they have their own copy. I mean, that depends on how many copies you were able to acquire, of course. And I go very slow, and that's when I ask comprehension questions. As I'm reading, I'm going to pause. Who can tell me what just happened? Or did she go here or did she go there? And that way I can gauge how well my students are following. We typically stop when I see that the interest is waning. So when the interest is waning, we stop reading. Another way that I like to read, and in fact, that's not a way that I like, it's just my students love this way. Again, middle school, this may not work in high school, I don't know, but my middle schoolers love pop reading. And what this is this time, instead of me reading from the book and everybody's following with their copies, I project the book on the board, so we're all looking at the board. And I'm going to read the first sentence in the target language. And if anyone knows what it means, they're going to pop out of their seats and tell me what it means in English. You can use this for a chapter where there's not much going on. There's maybe a chapter or a passage where there's not as much action. And so that keeps the students engaged in a different way. I would not do pop reading when there's a lot going on in the chapter. I much prefer doing the teacher read aloud. So again, you can ask your students, hey, how do you feel about a little pop reading on this one? And then see how it goes. My middle schoolers love that. So again, you're reading in the target language, and your students pop out of their chair to tell you what it means in English, and then you move on. And then the last way that I enjoy reading with my students is doing sound effects. So this is specifically when we have read a chapter or we have read a book, and I would like to read it again. And that's really boring. Like nobody wants to hear the same story again. So we read with sound effects. And an example of that is with my graphic novel, La Planète Grise, The Gray Planet, El Planeta Gris. It's pretty short. So we finish it pretty quickly. Within a couple of days, we're done reading it. And I organize a read through again where my students can volunteer to be characters or narrators. But that probably gives the stage to maybe 6 or 7 students, right? So what does everybody else do while those 6 or 7 students are reading their lines? This is where sound effects is really cool, and it builds community. So I pull out phrases or words from the text that are going to show up a few times. And then the students who don't have a part can come to me in pairs, and I show them the word. I don't show anybody else. It's a secret. So here, for example, I'm going to show them the word un robot. I'm going to show them that word. They can go in the hallway and come up with a sound for a sound effect for that word, right? Casa, house, would be another potential word. Or a phrase, es muy peligroso. And now they have to come up with a sound for es muy peligroso, okay? So this happens in secret. I show them the words and they go in pairs in the hallway, come up with their sound, and then we all come back and we start the read through. My characters read their lines, my narrators read their lines, and now when they hear un robot, I'm assuming that's how you say it in Spanish, they can make the sound, and it brings the whole book to life. It's a really fun way to revisit any text and any story, and not just a book. And it allows the students to see all those key messages and key vocabulary again. Okay, so moving on to the third stage of assessing. Before I go there, I must be very honest that assessment is a topic that I constantly struggle with. I'm sure a lot of you can relate. I don't have it together. I never have it together because I always have to come back to what is it that I'm trying to assess? What is the purpose of my assessment? And if I'm not clear on that, then I am going to mess it up for sure. So for our first classroom novel, the purpose of my assessments are to check that students understand key phrases and key messages, to provide more input on those key phrases. So I know that may sound like, what? It's an assessment and you're providing more input? Yes, I never see an assessment as just a moment in time where we stop everything, we stop acquiring, and all I do is evaluate my students, right? I think of assessment of yet another opportunity to provide input so that my students get even more language into their brains. Inform the next lesson, especially if it's a formative assessment. And this is the choice piece, let students show off what they know and or what they can do. All right, so with that in mind, let's take a look at some assessments. And we'll start with formative assessments. Again, I have different ones that you will see in the one-pager. But I really like this one, the marker game. So it's a game, but it's also an assessment. Before I show the video, let me explain how the marker game works. You're reading any text. So you're reading your first classroom novel, and you're going to say some statements. You can either say the statements or project the statements on the board, and they have to read it, or you can do both. You project and you read the statements. If the statement is true, let me backtrack. You have to have pairs of students first. So you have your students working in pairs, and they're sitting on the ground, and between them is a marker. That's why it's called the marker game. So you're reading the statement. If the statement is true, they don't do anything. If the statement is false, they have to grab the marker, and whoever is first gets the point. So let's say you're reading about Alice, la liste, and you say in the target language, Alice goes to the ice cream parlor with her friends. That's false. So they have to grab the marker. But if you said Alice goes to the ice cream parlor with Bilal, that's true, and they should not do anything. I have a cool adaptation of this for graphic novels. Again, I teach middle schoolers, so I love teaching and reading graphic novels. And so here I extract different illustrations from the book, as you can see. I project them on my whiteboard, and then each student has access to the images, and they're sitting in pairs again, and there is a marker. And I'm going to call out, I'm going to say things about an image. If it's an image that, if what I'm describing is on the image, then they have to put their finger on it. If what I'm describing is not any of the images, then they have to grab the marker. That was a lot of explanation. So we're going to watch a video. Can I have one of the moderators tell me if you can hear the sound? And also you're going to see that this is very middle school, so get ready.
Ah, tout le monde écoute.
Yes, we hear sound.
Théa est frustrée.
So I called out Théa est frustrée. Théa is frustrated. One student grabbed the marker thinking, nope, that's not an image. And another one pointed at the image because she saw that here she's frustrated.
Théa est frustrée.
So now I say, yeah, it was Théa is frustrated, and I'm pointing at the one that I'm projecting so students can check, and now they can tally the points.
Bien. Ok. Ok, tout le monde écoute. Théa dit, bravo Issa, ton pouvoir est très fort. Ton pouvoir est très fort. Wouh, bravo. Ok. Ok, tout le monde écoute. Théa voit une personne. Théa voit une personne. Théa voit une personne.
I'm not mean, I'm just winning. I love middle schoolers. So what I love about this game is they are tallying their own points. I don't have to be the referee for anything. All I have to do is focus on providing input on some key phrases. So this is a really good way to assess as I'm walking around, since I don't have anything to do but just say the sentences. I can assess and walk around and see how much they are comprehending. So very neat formative assessment and very versatile. So you can adapt it for a graphic novel this way, or you can do it for a regular book by projecting statements. What about summative assessment? So this is where I've come a long way, I think. I now ask my students these questions. What kind of project would you like to do about the book to show me what you've learned? So it's kind of like, it's a little scary because you're losing a little control here. And so, but you're going to see it really, they come up with the best ideas. So we do a brainstorming about this, And there are some ideas that are going to come back every year, right? Like every year, there are students who just want to act out the book, right? And just recreate the book and bring props, okay? And then there are some students who absolutely don't want to do any kind of performance and they'd rather draw, show their artistic side. So we brainstorm ideas and then I create a choice board. So instead of having a pre-made choice board, the choice board changes every year based on what my students asked for. And what I love about this is I can come up with the idea of acting out. I come up with the idea of smash doodle based on what my students, tell me, and coming up with a song. But a couple of years ago, some students said, we want to run a special person interview of one of the characters. A special person interview is something we do at the beginning of the year to get to know each other and to establish some foundational language so basically we interview all of the students in the class one by one. And they want to run that interview and make up the answers for one of the characters. I thought that was brilliant. So yes, of course, that goes in my choice board, but that's the reward that you reap when you open the question and when you pose the question to your students. I ask them to use the language they know and language from the book. So what that means is they have to go back to the book and read again or extract some things again from the book. So it gives them another reading or read through of the book. So again, this is a way that you can not only infuse choice, but really voice in your summative assessments. And that's all I had for you today. I am at 30 minutes. I hope Erin is very proud of me. And I wanted to keep 5 minutes for questions. So if you have any questions, can we open it up, please, Melissa?
Yes, absolutely. So there were some in the chat, so
Okay,
I can go back
perfect.
and take a look at some of those.
Yes.
Liliana asked, how do you make sure that all of your students follow along and stay engaged?
So when we do the read aloud, I'm assuming that's probably when the question was asked.
I'm thinking so. It was back a little ways.
Yes, when you are doing the read aloud.
Yes. You do your best. Of course, you're not in your student's brain, but that's why you're not just reading without pausing. So you read and then you pause and say, who can tell me what just happened? Or you can do a turn and talk and tell your partner what just happened. Things like that make sure that they are following along. You're not just reading like a robot. You are asking questions and making sure that they are engaged and that they're following along. I hope that helps.
Another question, also from Liliana. How much time do students have to complete their projects when you're doing the project assessments?
Say again, please.
It was how much time do students have to complete their projects?
Oh, that really depends on the nature of the project. That depends on the book. That depends on how often you see them. So this particular choice board that we created with my students was for a 6th grade class. And I see them about once a week, a little bit over once a week. So typically I give them we have a 65-minute period. So I give them one whole period to go through the book again, get in the groups and start creating. And then they present their project the next time. So whatever is left after the 65 minutes, they take it as a homework, they finish it, they have another week, and then they present their project the next class. But that's because I only see them once a week. Obviously, if you see them every day, you might have a very different way of organizing it. Those are great questions.
I didn't notice anything else. So if you have questions, oh, here's one from Margaret. The name of the first site of books other than the lab. So you gave 2 websites. One was lab and there was another one, and she didn't quite catch that one.
Yes, it's the Word Language bookshelf, and I will have the link for you in the one-pager. That's where you find the inventory of all the language learners that are available in Spanish, French, and German.
We've got a couple minutes left, so if you have a question for Cécile and would like to ask it, you can go ahead and unmute or you can put it in the chat.
Or if you want, you can put one key idea in the chat that you got from this presentation as a way to, you know, commit to something that you want to do in your classroom as far as choice and voice is concerned. I would love to hear that. I see in the chat the idea of the sound effects. Love reading love reading with the class. The marker game is really fun and it's a great way to provide more inputs to the students. I like to read for enjoyment and not do worksheets always. Absolutely. Choosing a book together, that is, if you can manage to implement that, that's just, it makes such a difference. Keeping the sound effects secret, yes. The choice board for projects. The see, think, and wonder before reading a book. Not just before reading the book, but anytime you come to a key chapter, you can lift the illustration and do a see, think, wonder. The assessments, giving agency to students. The marker game, okay, awesome, thank you so much. I see more, but I think we're running out of time.
Yes, it is 6:35. Thank you so much, Cécile. This was a great presentation. I think if anybody was hesitant about reading a book with their students before, they are not going to be now. You gave so many awesome suggestions. So Cécile just has her information here, her contact information. I'm also going to drop it into the chat real quick. So let me grab that and I'll put that in there. Her website, Toward Proficiency, is now in the chat. And I will also give you her email address so that you can copy that if you want to. And there that is. So thank you so much, Cécile. We really appreciate your awesome presentation, and it was wonderful to listen to.